This is Nan Tynberg of the Palm Springs Public Library's Local History Project. I am so pleased to be here today with Eileen Miguel, a leading figure in the history of the Aguascalientes, the first and true founders of this area we call Palm Springs. We are at the home of Richard and Eileen Miguel, among the canyons of Palm Springs, and today's date is July 13th, 1987. Eileen, we are going to start to talk about your ancestors. You are one of the few Aguascalientes who can tell us about your ancestors. The prominent ones, first of all, I'd like to say you're a descendant of one of the 5 major families who settled Palm Springs hundreds of years ago. Who were the other families? What were some of those other names?
Now, see, those were, I don't remember.
Okay. Well, you are...
I should have found out from my aunt, but I didn't.
You are a potentio.
Yes, my mother was a potentio.
Extremely important name in the history of,
yes.
of this area. How was Jane Augustine Potentio related to you?
She was my great-grandmother. She was my
Your
grandfather's mother.
And the cemetery is...
The cemetery is named after her.
I see. Mm-hmm. Did you know anything about her? Were you told anything about her over the years?
Not really. Just the fact that when she died, from the way I hear it, I know it from my family, is that when they were taking her to bury her at the old cemetery, which is located at the beginning of Tockwitz Drive at the foot of the hills,
Right.
The Indian people were stopped because that had now become non-Indian land, and they couldn't bury her there, so they just didn't know what else to do. And I guess her oldest son, Alejo, I guess looked around for a place to put her, and the spot that is on Tockwitz Drive now is the spot that he found and said, well, this is where we will bury her.
I see.
So yes. She was the first one buried there. And,
that is a famous story, yes.
So that's where she is buried.
I see, and of course the cemetery is named for her.
Yes, the cemetery is named after her.
Yes. Now, one of her sons was your grandfather.
Yes, Albert.
And another son, she had what you
said?
She had
4 sons.
But 17 children in
all?
No,
No, 7. She had 7 children.
Oh.
2 children, 2 of her older daughters that had preceded her in death are buried at the foothills of Tockwitz Drive. And then she had 4 sons and then 1 other daughter.
I see. And one of those sons was Francisco.
Yes,
Potentio,
that's right.
And he is extremely venerated and well known.
That's true.
Among everybody. Was it true that he died well into his hundreds?
I don't really think he was that old.
Oh.
No, because I think my grandfather was, I believe he was 89 when he died.
I see. Well, you have been extremely important to us because you are as I call you, the one who will straighten out a lot of these myths. That you really have the truth of the situation. At any rate, he might not have been 100 or 105 when he died, but he was a most revered leader.
Yes,
and
he was.
He also was a singer of the songs. Would you like to explain exactly?
From what I understand, they all were, all the brothers.
I see. Oh.
And
yeah.
I guess, well, I know in those days that they, as the younger were growing up, you automatically didn't have a TV to go to into another room to, so you just more or less grew up just like I did with my grandmother and my grandfather, and just learned the ways that.
Now, were these songs only sung at the funerals and the ceremonies for the dead?
Right.
And what were they about? Were they about the person who died, or were they about the history of the Indians?
I believe it was more a history of their death. My aunt tells us that there are songs for when the body is first brought to the wake, and then it goes until midnight, and then at midnight there are the songs that follow through the morning until dawn.
So it's a combination of many histories plus the history of the person.
I guess,
because they go for hours.
It's all night. Yes, all night. They generally start, maybe 8, 9 9:30, something like that, when they get
And
started.
these songs were passed down
Well,
generation to generation until now.
Until now,
Yes.
yes.
Joe Potentio, was that Francisco's son?
No,
No.
Joe Potentio was the son of Moreno Potentio,
I
one
see.
other son.
So still your cousin,
Yes,
in a sense.
yes.
And you said that Joe, was it Francisco or Joe who spoke to you in the Cahuilla
No,
tongue?
it was Joe Potentio,
Joe
my
who-
Uncle Joe. I called him my Uncle Joe.
I see.
And, he never spoke to me in English.
That's interesting.
Never.
You understood.
I understand.
Yes.
I don't speak the
Right,
language, but I
right.
understand it.
Right, and you are one of, other than your aunt, who we will talk about in a minute, the few remaining Aguacalientes who really understands the language.
Yes, it would mostly be those at my age bracket that,
Mhm.
that understood it.
I see. Now, you mentioned your aunt, Flora Potentio Siva, who's also an extreme...
Use the name, Siva.
Okay, Flora Potentio. Is your mother's sister?
It's my mother's sister. There was just
Right.
the two of them.
And she raised you, or
She-
raised your brothers and sisters when your mother died at a relatively early age.
Yes,
so
that's-
since you were the oldest, you have a close relationship with her.
Yes, She
And
was just like a mother to us.
Yes. And she really still has the ability to carry on the ceremonial rituals.
She does.
If they would be
Yes,
continued. So
that's true.
And she is how old at this point?
She's 79. She'll be 80 in January.
Yes. And she shares a lot with you. She talks
Yes,
to you.
she talks to us and then and tells us things. But a lot of things we forget so quick.
She had no offspring. No
No,
children.
she had no children.
Right.
My mother had them all.
So I might mention that your mother had 9 children.
She had 9. We always say 9. She really had 11. There were 2 that died after I was born. I'm the oldest.
Right.
2 died after that, and then the surviving 8. There was 9 of us that grew up. They died just as children, babies.
So Flora Potentio obviously is a very important figure in your life, and
Yeah, well,
continues to be so.
On my mother's side, she's all we have.
Yes, and she was a singer as well in her
Right.
day, singer of the songs. And
Right.
do you remember hearing her?
Oh yes.
No. And also obviously speaks the...
Yes, because
tongue.
whenever there was a wake or anything, they didn't leave us home. We went. We went everywhere they went.
Right, so you were
So
very much a part of it.
Yes, we've seen a lot of the.
As you say, which is very different than when you were raising your children. because-
Yes, and when my children were
Different
growing
time.
up, I never took them anyplace. I had a babysitter, left them home. That's why they don't know anything, know.
Interesting. So it
They
lies
really
with
don't.
you and
Mhm.
lies with your aunt. You were born on Section 14.
Yes, right on
And-
Tarquitz Drive, right in the middle of the street, or maybe you might say directly north of the Palm Springs Bank.
Oh,
That's where
yes.
my grandmother's home was at.
Yes. What? And you were there until what age? Rather
Oh.
early, or?
Gosh, yes, I can't remember how long we were there, and then we moved up. My mother had property across from the old Casitas Del Monte Hotel,
Yes.
and our home was there, for a long time.
Right.
This area that I'm in now it was in the boondocks.
Right. We are among the canyons, as I
Now
mentioned.
we're not far from town, but
No,
it seemed
no.
like forever then.
And you describe your growing up. Of course, you were fairly isolated out this
We were.
way. You describe swimming in the ditches that...
Well, we had running water from the canyons, and that's was our drinking water, our swimming water, and our cooking water, and just whatever water's used for. That's
And
what we
you do
used.
remember some of the other neighbors who used to share the swimming ditches with you.
Well, they weren't exactly neighbors because they had to come a ways.
I see.
I think the closest that used to come and play in the water with us was the Maloofs.
And how did they walked over? Or
I really can't even remember now how they got there. Maybe they walked. I don't know.
But you were far enough, obviously, from Francis Stevens School, where you went to school in your early years, to take a bus.
Yes, we had to take a bus. Yeah,
Yes.
there was nothing in between where we lived and town.
And you do remember the Americanization room, although obviously you were not, well, not obviously, you do remember one Indian family or Indian that had to, actually a Native American who had to attend the Americanization room, as did...
I didn't know that that's what they called it then.
But you remember the building.
It was a little building right in the corner by itself where different ones went, but we never did. We always went right to the main part of the school.
And you did tell me also about discrimination at the theaters, the local theaters.
Oh yeah, the theaters, the Mexican people and the colored people had to sit in a certain spot, you know, where they couldn't just walk into the theater and sit wherever they wanted to sit. But yet, we always did. We sat wherever we wanted to sit. There was never any problem.
I see. Among your school friends, you have fond memories, or you remember certain names of people who were around at Francis Stevens and so forth when you were?
Yeah, there's a few of them that are still here in town that I see now and then, like Robert Hillary from Cathedral City, Don Williams, and Don Du Bois of Uncle Don's, and Vivian Guttello. I don't know what her married name is now. And the Maloofs.
Yes, of course. Yes.
There's probably a few more I can't think right offhand.
You described your living conditions out here. They were very simple, shall we say. Of course, your mother was raising 9 children. You were the oldest. You were more or less, you said you had a baby on your hip for most of your early life.
I walked crooked for a long time after they were grown.
Oh my.
I always had a baby on my hip.
It was simple, but you were always busy. We were
always busy.
What did your mother cook on?
Well, she cooked on a wood stove, and
how did you get the wood?
Well, we sometimes we'd go out into the desert and just look for wood, and then from the business, the Millard Wright was using some of our property for citrus trees and things that he sold, and if one happened to die or branches broke or something, we gathered that for wood.
In fact, your father worked for him.
My father worked for him.
But he used your property to grow his trees.
And we used to go to the valley on days that my father didn't work, and my father would cut mesquite wood down there. That was an all-day job. And then when he went to work, well, it was my job then to chop the wood and have it ready. We were always busy. I mean, we had no electricity, no running water, just what was in the ditch. But we had a happy life. We always found something to do. And
very close
babies
family,
to take care of.
Very close family, and there was a lot of discipline and not much fooling around.
No, there was no fooling around. My father was very strict with us.
Yes. You mentioned that your father would hunt on his days off.
Yes, on his days off, he would hunt up, for instance, in the area that I live in now. This was just way out then. What I thought was way out.
Yes.
Yeah, he hunted.
What were the kinds of animals that he would bring back?
Oh, a quail or cottontail, sometimes rabbit.
A little.
Just the smaller things.
And how did he rifle?
With a rifle, yes.
Yeah. You describe your so-called entertainment, various expeditions you would. Well, I think it's interesting to mention that your family shopped at Safeway, and that was sort of an expedition. Once a week, you would.
It was every time my father got paid. Then it was it was big time for us, because then we got to go to town with my mother and shop for groceries.
But you also you always had a new car.
Yeah, my father had a new car every year. We might not have had nothing else, but we always had a new car.
And you would go to San Diego.
We'd go to San Diego because he liked fish, and we'd go there to buy fish. And when the Cherry Festival came about in Beaumont in June, well, we'd leave early so we could park close to the fence so we could see the entertainment going on. We could not get off and go in.
Yes.
But we parked close to the fence so we could see what was going on, watch the merry-go-round or what have you. And then before we left, well, then my father would call a vendor over to the gate, and we'd each get candy apple or cotton candy.
But you didn't have gifts and candy and that kind of business around.
There was too many of us, they couldn't afford it.
Right. Summers were not much different than the rest of the year.
No, it wasn't. Everything was the same.
You describe every now and then your father would bring home a radio or a bike or?
Oh, no, at one time he, I guess maybe we got a little ahead or something, but he, I remember Montgomery Ward, he got a battery-run radio and one bicycle. And
did you all share?
and we all shared, yeah.
Yes.
Well, my sister and I were the biggest then, and my brother was still small, and my sister they were still little. The smaller ones
Sure.
were too small.
Yeah.
So it was just another sister and I that got to use the bicycle. Till my father couldn't keep up the payment, so they came and took it away.
One
But
would
right-
think they would have forgotten or something.
Where we lived, I would think
But
so.
you do
they didn't.
remember that. That was a
Oh,
vivid
yeah.
memory for you.
Mhm.
Yes. And you did skate. You would
Yeah.
occasionally go into
Yeah, into town during the summertime when everybody left town, we
Yeah.
could skate up and down Palm Canyon Drive.
Your mother was close with some of the families here. Was that from the days when you lived on Section 14? I'm thinking of McKinney's. You mentioned that your mother was close to Rose McKinney.
I don't know, just from hearing my aunt, I guess they were close to a lot of the old settlers here, but I don't remember
Yes.
all that.
But you do
I remember of the names
some
and-
Mexican
And the
American
Mexican
names.
people that we knew that lived right on Section 14 also.
I see. And who were?
Well, the Mendozas, the Ayalas, and the Prietos. I think they were just about the main ones that we knew.
Yes.
The Fonteses.
Yes.
Yeah, we
those
knew
are
of them.
well-known names.
Hmm.
Right. You went to Francis Stevens School until you were approximately 11.
Yes, I was at Francis Stevens School, and then when I was 11, I went away to St. Boniface Indian School in Banning.
Right.
I was
You
there
had
just
a
1 year.
bad experience there that we won't dwell on. I think it's interesting to note that this was a school for Indians.
Yes, and then there were day scholars that were non-Indian.
I see.
Yeah, there were
I
day
see.
scholars. And I lived right there on the grounds, right? I boarded there
Right.
for
And
1
then
year.
You went to Sherman Institute in
Yes,
Riverside for high school.
after I left Banning, well then I
Yes.
went to Sherman Institute and I was there for 7 years.
And you actually worked on weekends.
I worked
there.
on weekends
Yes.
for a Dr. Schroeder who was an eye doctor downtown, the Fox Theater.
Oh,
I'd finish the house in the morning, and then afternoon I worked in the office.
yeah. So you worked most of your
Yeah,
high school
every
years.
Saturday.
Sherman Institute also Indian school?
It was an Indian school,
I
yes.
see.
Uh-huh.
Right.
It was a high school
Yes.
in my
Yes.
day.
Yes.
In
Was
fact,
it co-ed? Was it men and women?
oh
Girls
yes,
and
oh
boys
yes,
as well?
yes, yeah. Then 1947 was when they first brought in, I remember the first Navajo.
Oh,
In 1946, I should say, because
That's
I left in
interesting.
47. Then in 47, they all came in. The Navajos and the Hopis and really real reservation Indians they brought in at that
interesting.
time.
Probably from
Just from all over, because when I was in school, I went to school, with boys and girls from Northern California,
Right.
some as far away as Idaho and the Dakotas,
I see.
place like that. But it was in 1946 when they brought in the first, what you might call a real reservation Indian that didn't talk
I
English
was
or.
going to say,
you know,
yes, they
we
probably
had to
all had
teach
different
them.
dialects.
Yes,
That's
they.
interesting.
Then in 47, then we really had them.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's interesting. You are, as I consider you, the keeper of the traditions, and you can tell me about why the cemetery is so important. The ceremonials for the dead, and the cemetery that you've worked on so hard to keep.
Well, actually, I'm not a keeper of the tradition or anything. It's just things that I grew up with,
Yes.
and I just automatically still do today. But the cemetery was very important to me because I have traveled to many different cemeteries all over Southern California, and I have seen the dignity and the respect that each one of them has, no matter where they might be isolated. Maybe you went through the dust to get to them, or I went to one at one time that just hung on the side of the mountain, but they were highly respected, and as ours was. But then one day I just got to thinking, and I told my aunt, I said, we should do something Well, the cemetery, before it's, it's being surrounded by the development, and there's nothing we can do about it. It's there, and one day somebody's going to say we're an eyesore. So I think we should try to do something about it. So I had it in my mind for quite a while, and then one day at the tribal council meeting, Ray Potentio was the chairman then. So I asked him if I could have permission to look into something, to see if there was something I could do. And so the council, under his direction, gave me the permission. And I talked to my aunt to see what she thought and all, and then
This is Flora.
This is, Flora Potentio. I talked to her, and then to my sister Dora, who we're very close. And so we started thinking amongst ourselves, and then we looked into architects and came across Michael Buccino. And I was really, really happy with him. We worked very close with him, right down to picking the last little plant that's in the cemetery. And we really worked hard. We had to convince the tribe.
Yes, it was not easy to
no,
even
it wasn't
convince
easy.
your own.
To my own people, it wasn't very easy because they felt that we were spending too much money, and maybe we should really save it for the living, rather the younger generation,
Yes.
Rather than spend it on the dead. But I had always felt that these people lying there, like my grandfather and my mother, it's in our cemetery and all, that they were here and they struggled, and they didn't get to see long-term leasing. They didn't enjoy anything, and I thought this would be a way for us to say thank you to them.
Yes. We might mention that it is on Tockwitz McCallum.
And it is right on Tockwitz Drive, yes. And I remember as a child going out on decorating day or candlelighting day. We had to walk, and it just seemed like it was such a long ways there. Now you look at it, it's right downtown.
There were specific dates for, as you say, decorating day and candlelighting day. May,
Yeah,
November?
we light candles in November and then decorate the graves in May.
That's true. Well, you and your sister really spearheaded the impetus.
Yeah,
to
Dora
preserve
Prieto
it.
and I,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
We traveled a long ways. A lot of our members live out of town, and we had to go
Oh, that's
to as many as we needed the majority of the tribe to get the council to go ahead and go along with our project. And so it meant traveling, a long ways. I think at one point we were 2 weeks on the road, just every day, coming home every night and going every day.
wow.
And
It's a lot
talking
of
to
work.
them, and it was a lot of work.
Yes.
And
You should
sometimes
be very
we-
proud. You really
I am.
have
I
accomplished
really am, because
something that's meaningful to you and to other people as well.
It really does, because like I said, on decoration day and on candlelighting, or when there's a funeral or something, it's just something like going to church every Sunday, something you just automatically do. You don't wait for somebody to tell you to do it or to tell you what to do. It's just something we automatically do. But my feeling about the cemetery was that, the younger generation are all, they're not all, full-blood Indians, and
Sure.
they weren't raised like I was.
Sure.
And they're non-Indians. They really don't understand. They don't feel. They don't know like I do. What little I do know. So I just felt that someday, that will be their identity.
Yes.
And they don't. You can sit next to anybody at a ball game, and they'll find out you're Indian. They'll say, "Well, oh yeah, well I'm Indian too." But I said, when these kids say that, they can pinpoint
They'll
it,
have
and
to
they'll
have
know
meaning.
where they stem
Yes.
from.
That's why this history is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah,
You
it-
made another interesting comment that relates to this. You said that during the tribal council meetings, then everyone is very Indian. But as soon as these days that
Oh.
they leave,
Well, that's just the way I look at it,
Sure.
because like I said, when I was on the tribal council also, I traveled to meetings on different reservations and seeing how they conducted things, and I belonged to the California Indians Congress. It was an Indian organization formed here in California. And we'd go to different conventions and different things, and try to help other Indians or have them help us on backing us on something or other. And I don't know, but our tribe, as Flora Potentio says today, there really is no Indian tribe here at all. We're just like the non-Indian. And when I sit in the tribal council meetings, we're all Indian. And the minute we leave those four walls, everybody goes their own way, and there's no togetherness.
Another myth, more or less, or I think a fact that's been misconceived is the idea of what people have called the big house, or the round house, which really was the big house, as you called it. It happened to have been round, and the burning of the so-called round house has been the reasons for that have been misconstrued, and I would like you to tell me why that was burned.
Oh, well, in 1951, when my grandfather, Albert Potentio, passed away, then at that time, traditionally, he was more or less what they called the leader of the tribe, not of the tribal council, but just the most highly respected one. And so after that, it went to Joe Potentio. And so I was at my aunt's home one day after my grandfather had died, before we had buried him, and he came and talked to my aunt and said, you know, what do you think we should do? Because he said the younger generation are all intermarrying, and the language is gone. Even his own children don't speak it. And there was just, I guess in his heart, he knew that it couldn't be carried on because they wouldn't know what to do. And so he came to my aunt because she was older than he was. And so it was the decision of the two of them then that everything ceremoniously that they use, whatever artifacts they were and all, were to be buried with my grandfather, and then our tradition would end then. And then the ceremony house, the big house, would be burnt down.
So it was a conscious decision on their part.
Yes, it was.
It had nothing to do with the fire department or anybody
no,
on the outside imposing the burning down of the building.
No, because see, just like on different reservations, when somebody is the head of something and they want tradition to go on, well then either the next in line or however they do it, they carry on. But if you don't know what to do, how can you carry on a tradition if you don't know what you're doing?
Yeah.
So to us, it's like maybe you'd be making fun if you really didn't understand what you were doing, because it was a serious business.
Yes, yes.
So anyway, because of the intermarriage and the younger generation, and we were all so integrated with the non-Indian and all, they just decided this would be the end of it. So they fed the people. They cooked at the big house. We had a kitchen and a dining room there next to the big house, and fed and set a match to it, and that was the end of it. I have attended other reservations where their traditions have ended, and watched them burn their houses down.
Ending in a right way, and instead of just having it dissipate over time.
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah, we wouldn't let it just fall apart.
I see.
No, they set a match to it.
Interesting. Tell me a little bit about the effigies, the figures that were made of the dead. That was part of the ceremony for the dead,
Yes.
was it not? And that was done every time?
I believe if I have it straight, and I really should have talked to my aunt before this, because my aunt is even today is the last one that still makes baskets. She makes baskets now and then, and she embroiders beautifully. So she would make the dolls, whether it would be in the form of a man or a woman or a child. And I think that they didn't do it every year. They waited until there were a few.
I see.
And my aunt would embroider the faces and everything. I mean, it was just, if it was an adult, it was the size of an adult. But my aunt was real good at that.
Yes.
And
Out of material?
Out of material. The same way with on Decoration Day, she never. Now we just go and we buy fake flowers. Then she used to make. She made beautiful roses out of crepe paper. She was real handy. She's still very handy with her hands. With her hands, she's still.
These days.
Yeah, she still does. She's busy all the time. All the time.
And she also made baskets.
Yes,
as you
she
say.
still makes one or two now and then
Yes.
whenever she feels like it. She does that between doing patchwork. She makes quilts. She makes one for every time one of our babies are born. She makes us a quilt.
But that was also an untruth, that every Indian made baskets.
No,
was
that's
not really
that's not true. It's just like anything else. It's like today, a lot of us needlepoint, a lot of us knit, a lot of us don't.
Right, right.
And when they made baskets in those days, it was to sell, to have money for food.
What about the fire dance? Did you ever witness that? The fire dances?
No.
Do you know what
No,
significance they
no.
had? Not.
No, a lot of things I can remember at the big house, you know, the wakes and stuff, but I was really too little.
Well, let us talk about you as a grown woman. You were involved, actually you were a young woman when you were on the tribal council under Viola Ortner. As secretary, you would be in your 20s at the time?
I don't even remember. I went on the council when I was in 1954.
And you were secretary for 5
For
years
5
before
years.
you were chairwoman for
Right.
7 years.
Right.
And those were extremely important years. You in fact shook hands with 2 presidents.
Yes,
You-
President Eisenhower and President Kennedy here at the airport.
And you, well, first of all, what were your duties as secretary?
Well, at that time, I took all the minutes. I did the minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I hand wrote all the minutes, and then take them into the office, and then the clerks in there would type up the version of what I had.
Right. And
written down.
obviously the tribal council has always worked with the city council. That's one of the...
Well, we were very close
and
at
you
that
had a good
time.
you
I thought we did.
characterized it as having a good relationship.
Yeah, we'd go to all the early morning mayor's breakfasts, and
Do you
sometimes
remember who were mayors during
Well, I
your
think
12 years?
ones we used to go to quite a bit was when Florian Boyd was the mayor,
Right.
and I mean, we might not have seen eye to eye, but
Sure.
I thought we had a good working relationship. And anytime dignitaries came into town, we were out there, as Frank Bogart said, we are 2 governments in this town. So we get to meet dignitaries coming in just as well as the city government did.
Right.
But a lot of that's kind of faded now. I don't know.
Oh, you don't see the same.
No, I don't see
Rapport?
this. No, not
Interesting.
anymore. Now I think we're just like anybody else. We just, you got to fight for what you think is right.
When you went to Washington, was that for the equalization allotment law when it?
Well,
came
yes,
into
I
effect?
was
Were
there.
you chairwoman of the tribal
No.
council at the time? You were still
No,
secretary.
I was still secretary. And that during the equalization and the long-term leasing.
Do you want to
Yeah.
explain what that is? I know it's very
On the
the equalization law and long-term leasing. I know it's complex, but just
yeah, I never really could understand exactly why it came about, but I do know that a lot of I guess the government, I'm sure Viola could explain this better to you. We each were given 47 acres of land, and then the Allotment Act. I mean, the allotments were ended in. I don't know why. I really never could really understand why the Equalization Act came in. But when President Eisenhower signed that in September of 1959, that ended all further distribution of land. So my youngest daughter was the last member of this tribe to get an allotment. Those all born after her now are...
sorry, we're fine.
Yeah, so anyway, yeah, my youngest daughter was the last one to get an allotment. And then they valued each one of our properties, I think up to $335,000. And there was about 16 of us who had allotments that were almost to that figure. So we didn't get equalization. But the rest of the members, they gave you land to try to bring your value up as close as they could to the rest of us.
I see.
And that's why some people have a lot of land and some don't. But that was the end of the allotments. We have no. The only tribal land we have left now is where the spa sits and the canyons and the
yes.
2 cemeteries and the church.
I
That's
see.
where Our Lady
Yes.
Guadalupe sits. It's all Indian land.
I see. When one looks up your name in old journals and newspapers, they always see you pictured with Judge McCabe, and apparently
The Great White Father.
right, another semi-myth that's been perpetrated over time, that he really had to do more with the conservatorship, and you really didn't have that much to do either with the conservatorship or with him.
That's true. Yeah, he was just a good friend of mine. I mean, I
I see.
could go to his chambers and go into his office
Yes.
anytime I wanted to talk to him.
He was a perfectly nice man.
But he was very
did-
nice.
Yes, he's
But,
been elevated to
Yeah.
Great White, as you say, Great White Father.
Yeah,
status.
they referred to him as the Great White Father, but we didn't.
I see.
I didn't really have anything to do with the conservatorship. I just seen what some of them were doing
I
to
see.
the Indians, you know.
Which was not. It
And
was
I think
not
went through his courts.
always a happy history, which he would probably have admitted to as well.
I'm sure.
Yes, which was not a happy history, and that preceded the final equalization
Right.
and allotments and
Right.
so forth. Another figure that is always mentioned is Lawrence Crosley, who
Oh,
is
yeah.
also controversial.
Lawrence Crosley's been here, I guess, forever. He was here when I was just a child.
Yes.
He was already here. I don't know when he came, but he was probably the only black person that was in Palm Springs, him and his
I
family.
think so,
you
for
know,
a long time,
A long
yes.
time. And
Yes.
he was a nice man, but
He was a businessman
he was
too,
a
and
businessman,
let's not
and
forget
I
that,
guess
yes.
to the end, I think he got a little greedy. But as a child, he was a nice man.
I see.
My father was crazy about him. But
Yeah, I think that
I really didn't,
generation was. I think.
yeah, we were such a small town. I mean, just everybody knew everybody, you
Yes.
know. And just,
I see.
but I really, and years later, I really didn't have too much to do with him, you know. Didn't know too much about him.
But his offspring are intertwined with the Indians.
Yes,
Some.
yes, some are with one
Family,
family
I
member, of a certain family rather. I don't know how it came about, but he ended up getting some of their property,
I see.
and so now today his heirs, I believe, still share in it.
I see. We thank you for your time and your information and your wonderful, wonderful family history and background. Is there anything you have said, alluded to this next generation, but is there anything further you'd like to add about the future of your people and their place in history and what will
I
ensue over the next
I
many years?
really don't know. The only thing, well, for one thing, like in our Constitution and bylaws, when we first worked on those to get one for this tribe, Mrs. Ortner wanted it to be 1/4 Agua Caliente blood. In many tribes, to be enrolled, you have to have their blood.
Oh.
Well, my feeling was that, to me, the Indian blood was more important than what kind of blood it
I
was.
see.
That was my feeling. So her and I compromised, and she gave in to just saying Indian blood and dropping it to 1/8, so that her children could be enrolled, because otherwise they wouldn't be enrolled.
I see.
So that's why her children were able to be enrolled, because we dropped it to 1/8. We had, of course, had to get the approval of the tribe to do this.
Well,
But,
now her mother was,
Juana Hatchett.
yes, her mother was not in Agua Caliente?
Yes.
She was,
yes,
but of
yes,
course
she
her
was.
father was not.
You know, he was not. But
He was white.
she was raised a little bit different than I was, you know. And I maybe because her father wasn't an Indian, I don't know. But the importance to me is the blood. I think that's more important because our blood is going. You know, this tribe is just, I don't know what to call us, a mongrel tribe or what, because we have all blends of bloods, and I feel that when say for instance, if a boy or girl marries another Indian, that gives their children more blood, more Indian blood. So I think we should hang on to as much as we can for as long as we can. And
well, in your day, your sister married an Agua Caliente?
No, one of my sisters married an Indian from another tribe.
I see.
And but one of my sisters, the one that worked with me on the cemetery committee, Dora Prieto, she married a Mexican fellow that we grew up with.
Sure.
But then some of us have enough blood that we will go for maybe at least a couple more generations.
I was thinking in your day, though, it was less common to intermarry. You married either other Agua Calientes or other Indians.
Yeah, more or less.
Mm-hmm. So it is.
But it's important to me. Identity is important to me because, like I said, you can, no matter where you go, if they find out you're Indian, they're Indian too. But I said when we say it, when our kids, we have kids in this tribe that are blonde and blue eyes. You'd never, if you've seen them anyplace else, you'd never know they were our tribe. Yes. But they can say I'm Indian, and even if they're not enrolled because they don't have enough blood, they know their people. They know they have identity.
They should know the background and the history.
My sister and I right now are helping one of the council members. We're making up a family, an enrolled family tree.
Yes,
for the tribal council. We'll work to where we stem from, and because mainly everybody stems from the Potentio family.
Right, right. Yes, it's interesting that in books you don't see family trees. I drew one of my own here, and it's curious that you don't see that. That would be most valuable
because
to
a lot of people can't trace very far back. You know,
and you go,
and I can go to my great grandmother, and
yes.
So I don't know. It's interesting, but then I see the younger children today, and they're just, you know, you go to. I was at a funeral over in Arizona, the Yuma reservation, and you'll see the younger, smaller children that are quiet. They're respectful because that's the way they're raised. But you come to a wake around here, and the kids are slamming in and out of the doors, you know, because they really don't understand the significance of a wake.
Well, I think when they get older and they want to find out,
then they will.
Then hopefully, you know, you'll be a source, or maybe this tape will help somewhat in understanding the background. So
it's like I said with the cemetery, I really feel it's something that one day, just like all around the nation, you go to see different monuments.
Absolutely.
I feel ours is a monument also, and that's how we actually gave that to the future generations as a monument for their identity. They'll know where they stem from.
This is a nice place to end. Thank you very much, Eileen. We appreciate it.
Welcome.